Hi, boys and girls. This week we're finishing up our unit on Jamestown. And this week we've been talking about the hardships that took place at Jamestown and the changes that resulted in the survival of Jamestown. We're also going to talk about the native peoples and their interactions with the English and how they helped contribute to the survival of Jamestown. So I'm going to review some of the hardships with you. What hardships did the Jamestown settlers face? The English colonists found life in Jamestown harder than they had expected. So hardships faced by the settlers. The site they chose to live on was marshy and it lacked safe drinking water. Marshy land is wet, damp, attracts lots of mosquitoes. And remember, at the beginning, they chose the Jamestown site because they thought it had plenty of fresh water. But they were wrong because the salt water from the Chesapeake Bay seeped into the James River. And so it contaminated the water and made it not good for drinking. A drought at the time of the settlement reduced the amount of food available to everyone in Virginia. So a drought means there was little or no rain for a long period of time, and this prevented them from being able to have a big harvest or to grow their crops. The settlers also lacked some skills necessary to provide for themselves, so they didn't know how to hunt or farm or build and get the supplies and things they needed for survival. So they lacked those skills. And many settlers, because of these issues, died of starvation and diseases. And remember, the diseases could have been from the mosquitoes because the land was marshy, so they carried lots of diseases. Now, what changes took place to ensure survival? Well, they had almost given up after the brutal winter of 1609-1610, the starving time, and the surviving colonists decided they were going to head back to England. They were done. They were giving up. And on their way back, they passed on the Chesapeake Bay 2 supply ships, bringing supplies and new settlers and food. So it was like a new chance of hope for them. So they turned back around and went back to continue the colony of Jamestown. The forced work program and strong leadership of Captain John Smith was also a huge change that helped the colony survive. He told the colonists, you don't work, you don't eat. Because in the beginning, they didn't save enough food up. So in order to do this, he made them work and grow their own crops. Then there was the development of the new settlements that spread away from the environment of Jamestown. So they started putting new settlements further up past Jamestown, like Henricus, and that would get away from that marshy land and the contaminated water. And also there was emphasis put on agriculture that ensured the survival of the colony. Agriculture is just a big word for farming. So they made sure they were growing their crops and taking care of their livestock. Now, how did the Powhatan or native people and the English settlers interact? So we know the Powhatan tribe were in the Tidewater region of Virginia near Jamestown, and they spoke the Algonquin language because we learned that earlier in the year. So the native people and the English settlers at Jamestown established trading relationships, and for a while they had positive interactions. So things were really going well, and they were getting along. Captain John Smith initiated these trading relationships with the native people. At one time, he was held in captivity in the village, the Powhatan village, and when he did that, he became friends with some of them and also started trading so he would be able to get what the colony needed. So the native peoples traded food, furs, and leather with the English in exchange for tools, pots, and copper for jewelry. So the English really needed that food and those furs and leathers, and then the native people really wanted those tools and pots and especially that copper to make that beautiful jewelry that they didn't have. The native people contributed to the survival of the Jamestown settlers in many ways. So Powhatan, who was chief of many tribes, provided leadership to his people, and he also taught the settlers survival skills that they had lacked. Pocahontas was the daughter of Powhatan, and she served as a contact between the native people and the English. So she kind of helped them communicate. She learned some of the English language. She went back and forth. And then the native people showed the settlers how to plant corn and tobacco. Now, why did the relationship between the Jamestown settlers and the native people change? Well, over time, the native people realized that the English settlement would continue to grow. So more and more settlers kept coming and taking more and more of their land. And so they came to see them as invaders who would take over their land. And eventually that was going to cause lots of problems.